Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock, so we'll get started. Looks like we have a little over 30 folks signed up and registered and signed in. My name is Bill Wilder, and I'm the director of the Life Cycle Institute at Life Cycle Engineering, and I'm delighted to be able to spend a few moments with you this afternoon talking about how we apply learning impact maps to change behavior and produce results. Before I get started, I just want to point out that in the lower right-hand corner there should be a navigation bar that has a few items in it, one of which is noteworthy is the dialog box, which is the little cartoon-looking little dialog box that you'll want to use to respond to questions via chat or if there are any issues you want to share with us as we proceed this afternoon. Again, thank you for joining us. Let me start by asking a question. And that is, what is your role in training? And if you would, just chat in some examples of how you're participating in training in your organization, what your role is. Maybe you're a facilitator or a designer, or maybe you help determine what the requirements might be, but we would be interested in knowing what your role is. Okay, so we see that we've got a couple of folks that actually deliver classes. We have some folks that design, that determine the requirements as far as what the knowledge and skills are. So it sounds like we have a good group together that would actually be able to use this impact map in fulfilling their role in the training process. Let me ask another question, which is, what do organizations invest in training for? Why? What is the reason that someone invests in a training initiative? And maybe you could chat in a couple of ideas of why companies invest in training. I see some is for training on new tools, to upskill their workforce, skills development, safety, replacement of older workers. Checking the box. How often do we hear that? Absolutely. And all of those are true. And I think that what I would point out here is learning is changing behavior to produce results. We heard that there, that we want more skills, we want to check the box. But at the end of the day, real learning that is successful is learning that actually produces results. And to produce results requires more than just the classroom environment. Because learning is really a process, not just an event. It's not just going into the class, learning about a new knowledge or skill, or learning some new information, and then leaving the class. If we believe that learning is really changing behavior to produce results, then it involves some aspect of actually applying that new knowledge and skills. Let's do a quick poll and get folks' input on what percentage of training actually leads to a behavior change that produces results. And I'm talking about just the classroom. If I sign you up for a time management class or a planning and scheduling class, if you would, go ahead and submit your response as to what percentage of that knowledge that you gained in that class actually gets applied to change some behavior and produce results. Got a few more seconds here to respond to the poll. And think about classes that you've been in and that you've learned, and then what you actually came back and applied in the workplace after you sat through that class. So we're going to wait just a couple more seconds here and see how the polling results turned out. There we go. 44, you can see 44, or let's put it this way, 84% of you have indicated that 15% or less of the training that takes place in the classroom actually gets applied when you're back on the workplace. And in fact, research would suggest that that is true, that 80%, a full 80% or better of real learning, that is behavior change that takes place to produce results, is outside of the classroom. And it all starts with desired results. What is the organization trying to achieve? Why are we investing in this training? So the starting point is to define very clearly what the performance gap is or the performance objective is, and then determine whether or not one training is the solution for that and how you would go about changing the behavior to produce results. And once we've determined what that is, let's take another poll and give some thought to what is the most important element in a successful learning or process reengineering initiative. Okay? So maybe you could chat in which of these you think is the most important influencer of success, not just in a learning initiative, but in any type of business process initiative. Okay, we've got mostly leadership. Looks like 2/3 are saying leadership. We've got some communication, training, communication. Here's a good one, leadership. Without it, there's no direction. Absolutely. And this is what we find is that in most of these initiatives, when you go back and do the post-mortem on why you didn't achieve the results, the desired result, that it tends to go back to, more than any of these others, a lack of leadership, sponsorship, engagement, and alignment. Now, there's no doubt tools are important, training is important, communication is important. They're all integral and in important parts. And you could argue that you might have the leadership, sponsorship, and engagement and not have the training delivered, and therefore you don't achieve results or don't have communication. But in most cases, what we find is that it's that lack of leadership, engagement, sponsorship, and support. This is one of the most important areas that learning impact maps can help us with. Let's take a look at what I mean when I say a learning impact map. Here's an example. And there are a lot of variations on what an impact map should look like. At the Institute, in our application of this, we have found that this particular format works well. It's elegantly simple, it's easy to administer, and it produces the results we want. And this is why we've chosen to take this particular format. Let's take a quick look at this, and then I'm going to dissect it a little further and show you some examples. But let's just go through a couple of things here real quick. First of all, we said that it starts with goals, the organization's goals. Then that's followed by what will I learn in the class? After I've gained that knowledge and skills, what will I do with it? And then what will I specifically produce? What will the results that I produce be from applying those knowledge and skills and the connection back to organization goals? Learning impact maps will do several things for you. First of all, by focusing on that organizational goal first, it can help you determine whether or not training is even a solution for the performance shortfall, whether or not it's going to actually contribute to achieving that broad business goal. Secondly, it prepares participants to learn and change behavior. Not only the participants, and actually it should say the managers here as well, because this is where it plays such an integral role in getting the manager involved, and I'm going to talk about how in a minute, but it gets the manager involved in setting the expectation with the participant on what exactly they're expected to do with the training that they are going to receive and how that training contributes to organizational performance. A typical learning impact map will show you three things. Going from left to right, if you'll remember the table that I showed you before, the first one is the knowledge and skills that the participant's going to learn in the class. You will often hear this referred to as learning objectives. And typically when we work with a client, that's exactly what we do, is we look at the learning objectives for the class, and we use those to fill out that far left column. Followed by, what is the participant going to do with the knowledge and skills that they've gained? What are the results they're going to achieve? And how does that contribute to the goals of the organization? So there, in a nutshell, is exactly what an impact map looks like. Now let's talk about the four key players in implementing a learning impact map. There's four key players. First of all, it's the participant, the person who is actually going to be in the classroom, the one that is expected to change their behavior in order to achieve some specific result. Second is the manager, and that would be the participant's immediate manager. Could be other folks up the line, but for the purposes of how we're going to talk about it here, it would be the manager of the individual. Third, the coordinator. And this could be any number of people, and it usually comes from different places in the organization. Could be somebody from the HR or learning organization. Could be somebody from a specific functional area or operations. But it's someone who has taken on the responsibility for administering the entire process and the overall success of the learning intervention. And then the facilitator, the person who actually delivers the training. Okay, four key players: participant, manager, coordinator, and facilitator. Now, let's look at some specific maps. As I said, the starting point is the last column on the far right. And this column is filled out before the participant even gets engaged. This is the sponsor actually filling this out, most likely with whoever the funding authority is or whoever's decided to spend money to make this investment. And it identifies the goal. So let's take a look at one. Here's one where the organizational goal is to make sure you have engaged employees, and the way you'll measure that is by performance on the Q12. And the Q12 is a set of questions that the Gallup organization put together over 30 years of research that can be used to help an organization determine whether or not their employees are actually engaged. And it has a number of questions, things like do I know what's expected of me in my job? Do I have a development plan? Has somebody commented favorably on my performance in the last 7 days? So those of you that are familiar with it know exactly what I'm talking about. But for the purposes of this example, it's strictly how the organization is measuring whether or not they have engaged employees. In another example that relates to the reliability world, it might be improve OEE by 10%. Okay? And again, this is set up by the sponsor with the senior leadership of the organization that's making this investment in the learning intervention. Okay. Now, the learning objectives, we talked about that a minute ago. These are typically, if you are making an investment in class, there'll be a set of specific, measurable, active learning objectives associated with that investment. Okay. Now, as I say here, focus on a few. Less is more. This is not intended to be a comprehensive map of every single objective, activity, and result required to achieve the organizational goal. This is a line of sight for a specific individual in the class that is going to align their thinking and perception going into this event with what they are to achieve as a result of taking the class. So let's again look at the one on improving OEE. In the far left column, it might be how to prepare and share detailed job plans. This column, likewise, is completed prior to engaging the manager or the participant in the dialogue. In the example of the engaged employee, the learning objective is create individual development plans. Okay, so this is a class for supervisors where they're going to learn how to create individual development plans. Again, line of sight all the way over to engaged employees. Once the map has been, those two columns have been completed in the Learning Impact Map, the coordinator meets with the manager. And in the meeting with the manager, the coordinator reviews that far right column of the organizational goals, reviews and describes the far left column, which is the learning objectives, and then talks to the manager about how to draw that line of sight between learning objectives and the individual's behavior and results, and how those would contribute to the overall organizational goals. Helps the manager understand how to interpret that impact map so that they can in turn have a meeting with their participants that will be in the class, which is the next step. Ideally, this meeting takes place 3 to 7 days before the class. And in this meeting, a number of issues are discussed. What are the business results that you personally can impact? What are the key areas of training? And what are the actions you're going to take? And in that meeting, as a result of this conversation, you will complete 1, what will I do? And then 2, the results that I will get. So in the case of this engaged employees, the individual is going to agree with their manager that they're going to take this class. They're going to learn how to create individual development plans. From that knowledge, they're going to complete formal individual development plans for all direct reports. And as a result of that, all the direct reports will know they have a development plan and be committed to completing it, which, as we know, engaged employees as measured by Q12 includes whether or not an individual feels like they have a development plan. Let's take a look at the OEE example. The manager and the employee participant have a conversation. They sit down. They agree that this is going to be the knowledge that they're going to learn, that as a result of that, they're going to create standard job plans that are updated, reviewed, and stored for shared access. And by having engaged in that action, they are going to have jobs that are completed based on the priority and increase overall schedule compliance, which is going to contribute. Again, it's not alone going to improve OEE 10%, but is going to contribute to the overall availability and other factors that go into making up the OEE metric. That conversation takes place between the manager and the participant before the class. Then before the class, one other thing takes place, ideally. The facilitator has access to those impact maps, and with that can begin to adapt in their own mind and in the delivery how they're going to focus this learning event on achieving those specific actions or objectives and behavior. At the end of the class, the facilitator will ask the participants to review their learning impact map. Take a few moments, look at your impact map. What did you learn that you didn't know before? Now that you've been through the class, are there additional things that you would want to take back to your manager about the types of behaviors that you want to change or the results you want to change and produce? And prepare yourself to go back and have a meeting with your manager to talk through the experience. And in that meeting, what would be some of the topics? Well, first of all, what did you think of the training? Was it a good investment? What kind of changes have you made to your impact map, if any? Did you learn something you didn't know before, or is there additional insight? Third, how can I support you? Now, this goes all the way back to that leadership engagement that we talked about before. How often do you go to a class and you come back to the office and the manager really wasn't all that thrilled about you going to the class in the first place because it took you off the job and they had to find a backup. They're really not real sure exactly what you were doing in the class, and they clearly don't understand that you are hoping to actually apply some of this when you get back to the workplace. But in this case now, they're actually going to have an active, proactive conversation with you to talk about how can I support you? How can I help you make these behavior changes and produce these results? And then lastly, how are you going to jointly monitor and measure progress? Now, there is a potential additional step where the manager and or participant together individually meet with the coordinator, where the coordinator can capture the essence of the entire experience and begin to document the results that are being produced in the organization. So let's take another quick look at the impact map from two different points of view. Let's say that you're going into get your funding to make this investment in the training. You might look at this map reading here at the top from right to left, giving a line of sight of how you will achieve desired business results. In other words, the focus is starting here where I want to improve OEE 10%. And the way I'm going to do that is by convincing you to invest X amount in this training program that's going to produce these results, because the people in that training program are going to start this behavior that is going to be driven by what they learn in the class. So again, this goes back to senior leadership engagement and understanding of why you're making that investment. Another way to look at the map is providing that line of sight for the individual in the class to clearly understand why they're going to the class and what it is that they're expected to do when they get out of the class. Let's just take, for example, our planning and scheduling class. If you go look on the website, you'll see maybe 18 learning objectives, 15 learning objectives there. Now, do you want to really send your folks to that class and have them just sit in there and figure out on their own which of those are the most important? You know, as we pointed out before, you really want to focus in on the key skills. You want to focus in on 2 to 3 probably at most on this impact map. So by having this conversation and using this impact map up front, the individual, the participant in the class, has a clear line of sight on why this investment is being made in them and exactly how their behavior is intended to impact the overall organization's goals. It's simple. It's really straightforward. It's in what I call elegantly simple way for securing leadership, engagement, expectations alignment, and participant engagement in the class. Learning impact maps. Let's take a just quick review of some of the reasons why you might want to consider using them the next time you make a learning investment. One, simple, is this training initiative worth doing? Is it going to really contribute? Can I draw a clear line of sight between the knowledge and skills that have been gained, the behavior, the results, and some organizational goal? Defend or use it to convince leadership to make the investment. So by having done your homework and laid this out, and you can show this clear line of sight, it will help you convince the funding source to make that investment. Alignment, communicating requirements for performance support prior and subsequent to training. So this is an alignment by the manager with the manager on what the manager's role is in supporting this individual in making this behavior change. Linking it to performance and business goals, we talked about that. Determine how to measure the training. I mean, how often have you been in a training class and at the end of the class you fill out this little sheet about how you felt about the class, as opposed to some type of evaluation that's targeted very specifically on the exact knowledge and skills you were going to gain and then whether or not you applied those. And then last, and I think this is very important, is to help begin to promote in the organization and among the folks involved that training is not an event. It's not just a classroom event. If you're really going to change behavior and produce results, the whole mental model has to change to one that says that learning is a process that begins with clear line of sight between objectives and desired behavior change and the results that be produced by that, and then support and coaching on the job after the class. So learning impact maps. If you'd like to know more about learning impact maps, we do have a very rich library of resources on our website. An example of what's there is various documents from white papers and articles to a blog that I and a number of my colleagues participate in and frequently provide updated information. In fact, there at the blog, you will be able to find a video where I describe, again, learning impact maps. So if there's someone in your organization that you feel like needs to hear this message, there's a 3-minute video on the web that you can download and share around and email all over the place. And, of course, at any time, you can contact me. The other thing is that we have a monthly newsletter that we send out. We do have 2 of them, actually. One for life cycle engineering that covers our whole reliability and operational excellence consulting practice, and then Impact, which deals typically with learning objectives and learning consulting. So again, if you have any questions or you need any support at all, documents, copies of impact maps, copies of this presentation, by all means, please contact me. The number there and the email address. The Lifecycle Institute, which I am a proud member of, provides high-impact learning solutions. We do learning consulting, and we provide a wide variety of learning opportunities, both public and private classes. And we're very proud to be a part of Lifecycle Engineering, a 30-plus year organization that's been helping companies and other organizations be successful. Thank you very much for your participation, and we look forward to hearing from you. Goodbye.